And so we're going to spend a few points talking about the 30,000-foot view of ministry and how we can take a step back and look at where we're going as a ministry that reflects our church's mission and vision. All right, so number one, the first principle is give students a place to belong before they believe. I think we all want our students to be those who actually reach out and invite their friends. Our students and their parents are our number one evangelists. They're our number one cheerleaders. They're the ones who are going to be bringing unchurched people who don't know Jesus to events, to programs. And we all want to have churches and ministries geared towards those students. But the question is, do we offer programming? Do we offer events that are actually visitor, unchurched friendly? I think a lot of times we want visitors to come to our churches and youth ministries, but from their first step in the door, they have to become like one of us, right? And I want to push back on that a little bit in just a moment. But the two major ways I think through how to welcome first-time guests, the unchurched completely, is both how we talk from the stage and how we present, how we welcome, but also with our environments and our atmosphere. We'll talk more about how to, with our words and how we're talking in just a minute. But in short, I think a lot of pastors, a lot of youth pastors, myself included, listen to podcasts, read books. I know where I want to take students with messages or with a semester-long curriculum, but I talk at this level up here. And I know students aren't there yet, so I get down to this level to try to dumb it down, water it down, if you will. Probably paraphrasing watering it down, but you know what I mean. And bring them along. But the reality is most students are just trying to figure it out. How do I follow Jesus on Monday? That's what they're really asking. How do I do this just on Monday at school? Or if you have a Wednesday night program, on Thursday. And so our goal as student pastors is to teach at a level where we can get all the way down where they are and bring them up with us. And so we'll talk more about that one in a minute. But with our environment and our atmosphere, we want to program for the guest and program for that student who does not know Jesus. And here's a tough question to ask yourself. Am I allowing the unchurched kid to act like an unchurched kid? Within reason. Big caveat. Am I allowing the truly unchurched, truly first-time guests to act like themselves? Do they really have a place to belong before they believe? And so the model used to be believe first and then belong. So when I was growing up, altar calls were big, and they still are. We still do a clear gospel presentation every quarter where we have students raise their hand, and that's a part of our culture still. But the majority of students don't believe first. They want to belong first. And so are we structuring our environments to let them belong before we believe? And so if you're doing church, or if we're doing our jobs and these students are coming in, and so we have to have these environments ready. And so at our church, what we do, I've never seen this before. I inherited this, so I'm not a super genius. But we have the weekend, so all of our small groups, our discipleship programming, if you will, is Sunday mornings. We have our presentation, a talk, a game, then we do small groups. Tuesday nights are pure outreach. And they're designed, hey, this is for you students who are in the room to bring your friends. This is why we do this. And if we're not bringing our friends, we're going to do something else, because that means that this is failing, right? And so those are called squad nights. Squad nights are, by definition, insane. Because they are full of unchurched kids. We actually just did a poll a couple weeks ago. Just raise your hand if you're not if you're just invited here by somebody else. That was over half the room was invited by somebody else. And I think a large part of it is because every single month I have to break up a fight, which glad to do that. I'm glad you're here hearing about Jesus. That's cool. Every single month when we meet at a park, we have students try to go in the woods to try to make out. I'm glad you're here hearing about Jesus, but now we're patrolling the perimeter. So actually, I dared one of our leaders, hey, if you find students making out, I'll give you a gift card. So now our leaders want to go perimeter check, and they want to go check it. So it works. But we let way more slide at a squad night than we ever would on a Sunday morning, because we don't expect our non-Christian guests to act like Christians. We don't expect it. So when there's a fight, I don't call their parents. We just break it up, talk to them like adults, go back in, right? We haven't caught anyone making out. I think the students knew we were starting to look for it, and no, they're not. My boss is back there. He knows all this. I'm fine. We're good. Donnie, we tell every parent. No, but there's just things that we let slide because we know the expectations, and our parents know the expectations. We tell our parents openly, we let more slide. This is for your kids' friends to come and hear about Jesus. And parents keep bringing their kids, and it baffles me, but they do. But that's just a breakdown of like how we do different programs throughout the week to reach different people, and our students are truly given a place to belong before they believe. And so with every single principle today, I'm going to ask you some questions that you can ask yourself along the way, just to ask yourself, hey, am I actually doing this in our ministry? So here's some questions. Do these students, do they really have a place to go party on Friday and be accepted on Sunday? Do these students really have a place to talk and open up about their LGBTQ plus sexuality and be accepted on a Sunday? Do these students really have a place to doubt, to raise questions, and disagree and be accepted? And I think the most important one is, do our leaders, our volunteers and small group leaders, do they lead this way? Because one thing for us to know the vision and mission, it's another thing for the entire ministry to know it as well, right? We'll talk about vision casting in just a little bit. But a couple questions to ask yourself are these ahead. Second point on programming. Talk to teenagers where they are, not where you are, and not where you think they should be. So part of my background, it was at a United Methodist Church outside Houston, and I had never ever stepped foot in a UMC, in a Methodist church before I took this role. Probably a poor decision on my part. Wound up loving the church, incredibly healthy, one of the healthiest churches I've ever been a part of. But when I got there, they handed me something called confirmation. And I was like, what? And they're like, hey, so this is confirmation. We want you to facilitate and run this. And I was like, okay. If you don't know what confirmation is, it's a more formal classroom type setting for either 6th or 8th grade, depending on the church, either a semester or a year long, where they sit down with leaders and they talk about things like, hey, just black and white, what is justification? What is sanctification? What's baptism? What is prayer? What is the church? And every week is a new topic. And I just saw these things, I was like, man, if I were in middle school, I would have no clue what the word justification is. I would have no clue what these mean. So one of the first things I did was spend the first week rewriting an entire semester worth of curriculum and lessons, during either taking out words I didn't think were we only need these, or I think they did, just taking time to up front, making sure every leader explained it as if it was a true first time guest, or a true just a non-Christian whose parents made them go to confirmation, which is more common than you might think. If you've ever been in Methodist church, you know that's true, right? A lot of these students who come out, their parents make them go. Because it's as close to a sacrament as you can get in the Methodist church. And so we wrote the entire thing. And then a couple weeks after into the job, the senior pastor and the worship pastor called me into their office, hey, you're an outsider. You're coming on Sunday mornings, worship. What do you see? What do you notice? What needs to be tweaked? And I was like, you don't know me. I'm not going to tell you what I really think. I really like this place. You guys are awesome, but we're not there yet. We're still surface level. Hey, how's it going? Good, great. See you later. That's our conversations. And they really pressed in. And I was they're like, hey, no, really, what needs to be tweaked? What needs to be changed? And I was like, if you're honest, if you're asking me, then why in the world are there 2 kids who walk down in robes with a candle? And they were like, well, that's the light of Christ. We light it and we carry it down as a reminder that Jesus is with us every time we worship. I'm just say that. Just explain it. Unapologetically, be you and be yourself. You don't have to be the church down the road. You don't have to be the church across town or that you see on social media. Be yourself. Just do it with a guest and that unchurched person in mind. You can do whatever you want, whatever liturgy, whatever prayers and creeds that churches do. Just explain what we're doing. That's my biggest pet peeve was I would be doing these things and not know why. Right? I have to know why. It drives my wife nuts, but I have to know why everything. But that was a good point of feedback. And we started shifting our worship, and as the first song was going, and the kids, the acolytes, walked down the candle, the worship leader would say, hey, we're going to invite the light of Christ as a symbol that Jesus is here. One sentence, game changer for a worship environment. Game changer. But we want to speak to where they are and just explain things. And there are 3 ways that we can actually speak to where they are, and 3 things to keep in mind. Speak to where they are spiritually. There's a whole point on discipleship coming up in just a minute. I'm not going to go into that right now, but speak to where they are spiritually. Speak to where they are emotionally. One of the biggest things I've seen in youth ministry is not normalizing their feelings, but trivializing their feelings, right? Sometimes as adults, we can look at what they're going through as middle and high school students, and we can think, oh, that's nothing. It'll only get worse from here. That's a real That's real encouraging. Like K-Love thing to say. Thanks. But in their world, with they've experienced, that might be the toughest thing they faced. And so speak to where they are emotionally. It's not up to us to tell them how they should feel. It's up to us to introduce them to who Jesus is and let the Holy Spirit do his work. But don't tell students how they should feel about something. And then speak to where they are neurologically. And this is just knowing basic facts about their brains. This is an entire breakout on its own. But just for instance, because I'm in middle school ministry, the middle school mind is very concrete. If you know anything about middle schoolers, or even the Orange Phase Project, the middle school mind is very concrete, which means things like give it to God, have faith. They do not compute because those are so abstract, and they're like engineers. They have to have a hands-on experience. And so one of the coolest things I've seen was actually last summer at a summer camp called Summer in the Sun. We told students, hey, just give your issues, give your sin, give your weaknesses, give it to God. But then what students did that night was each group got a Japanese sky lantern. They wrote on it in permanent marker. They lit it on fire, which is always a middle school win, and they released it into the sky. And the students got to metaphorically see themselves give something to God, right? But we don't know that about them because we're adults and we think, oh, they should get this. Hey, have faith, lean on God. Doesn't make any sense. I can't just lean. It doesn't make any sense to me. But if we can help these abstract ideas become more concrete, middle school students will understand it. The same is true for high school as they're beginning to think like philosophers and asking why and where do I belong and what is my purpose. Again, this is not a whole talk on neuroscience, but I highly recommend the Orange Phase Project. It's an incredible project. If you don't know what it is, just Google Orange Phases and you'll get it. It's amazing. But as we're going through talking to teenagers where they are, here's a question to ask yourself. As I'm speaking, hosting, or welcoming, what does the first-time guest hear? What are they hearing?